Once Upon a Time in America may look like a story about gangsters' memory and betrayal, but behind its haunting silence was a cast marked by fate. A young actor died before the film became legendary. A child star disappeared from Hollywood. A tough man lost the love of his life. A screen icon kept aging with grief by his side. What happened after the cameras stopped rolling revealed a truth even darker than Noodles' final smile. Robert De Niro as David Noodles Aronson. Robert De Niro did not play David Noodles Aronson like a criminal trying to survive. He played him like a man already haunted by the life he had chosen. In Once Upon a Time in America, Noodles is quiet, dangerous, sentimental, and morally broken, a street kid from New York who grows into a gangster, then returns as an old man to face the friend he may have betrayed the woman he destroyed, and the past that never stopped breathing. For De Niro, the role arrived after he had already become a legend. Born in Manhattan in 1943, raised between Greenwich Village and Little Italy, after his parents' separation, he understood loneliness before fame gave it a spotlight. By the time Sergio Leone cast him, De Niro had won Oscars for The Godfather Part 2 and Raging Bull yet. Noodles demanded something colder, not rage, but regret. After the film, his career kept expanding. The Untouchables, Goodfellas, Casino Heat, Meet the Parents, The Irishman Killers of the Flower Moon and later Zero Day and The Alto Nights. But behind that endurance, his private life grew complicated. 2 marriages ended in divorce, and his split from Grace Hightower became a long public legal battle over money support and family. In 2003, he faced prostate cancer and underwent treatment in New York. In 2023, tragedy struck harder when his 19-year-old grandson, Leandro De Niro Rodriguez, died from an accidental drug overdose, a loss that brought public grief into one of Hollywood's most guarded families. By 2026, De Niro is 82, still working, still a father to 7 children, including a young daughter born late in his life. His future does not look quiet. It looks unfinished. Like Noodles, he carries time in his eyes, but De Niro keeps moving through it. Scott Tyler as young David Noodles Aronson. Scott Tyler entered Once Upon a Time in America not as a famous child star, but as the boy who had to make Robert De Niro's future pain believable. Born Scott Schutzman with public records listing his birth year as 1971, he was only about 14 when he played young Noodles, the streetwise Lower East Side teenager whose hunger, loyalty, jealousy, and violence would one day harden into the haunted old gangster seen in De Niro's face. His Noodles was not innocent in the simple sense. He was clever, restless, romantic, and already damaged by poverty. In the childhood section, Scott carried one of the film's most important emotional burdens, showing how a boy could still dream through a window at Deborah, yet slowly learn the language of crime, possession, and revenge. Without him, the older Noodles would feel like a mystery. With him, the audience sees the wound before it becomes a scar. There is little public information about Scott's early family life, and that silence gives his story a different kind of sadness. After standing inside Sergio Leone's monumental gangster epic, his screen career did not explode the way some viewers might have expected. AFI Records list later credits including 3 O'Clock High, Misplaced, and John Sayles' City of Hope, but by the early 1990s, his visible film career had become quiet. That was the understated tragedy, not scandal, not collapse, but disappearance. A young actor linked forever to one of cinema's greatest memory films gradually stepped away from the public frame. By 2026, Scott Tyler is believed to be in his mid-50s, known mostly to film lovers as Young Noodles, and associated in public bios with acting coaching and stage work. His future seems private, modest and close to the craft rather than the spotlight. In a film about time-swallowing boys, whole Scott Tyler became one of its quietest echoes. James Woods as Maximilian Max Berkovich. James Woods played Max as a man whose ambition was so bright it almost looked like destiny until it began burning everyone around him. In Once Upon a Time in America, Max is Noodles' closest friend, his partner in crime, and the ghost behind the film's deepest betrayal. He is charming, quick, violent, and terrifyingly intelligent. The kind of man who can turn brotherhood into a business deal and still smile, as if nothing sacred has been broken. Born James Howard Woods on April 18, 1947 in Vernal, Utah. Woods carried intensity long before it became his trademark. His father, an Army intelligence officer, died when Woods was still young, leaving a wound that shaped his early life. Brilliant enough to study at NYT, he walked away before graduating, choosing acting over security, a dangerous decision, but one that gave Hollywood one of its sharpest, most unpredictable performers. After Once Upon a Time in America, Woods did not fade. He became the actor directors called when they needed intelligence with danger underneath it. Salvador earned him an Oscar nomination. Ghosts of Mississippi brought another. Casino contact vampires and his unforgettable voice as Hades in Hercules expanded his image far beyond Max. But his personal life was far less stable. 2 marriages ended quickly. He never had children. His second marriage to Sarah Owen became tabloid material filled with painful accusations and public bitterness. Later, his strong political views and online controversies made him one of the Hollywood's most divisive figures, and major acting roles became increasingly rare. The deepest blow came in 2006 when his younger brother Michael died after a heart attack. Woods sued the hospital claiming negligence, and the case ended in a settlement. It was not just a legal fight, it was grief made public. By 2026, Woods is 79, still respected for his talent, but living in a quieter and more controversial chapter. He has shifted toward producing music and selective public appearances. Like Max, he remains brilliant, restless, and impossible to ignore, but the applause now comes with shadows behind it. Keep watching with Legends of Classic and tell us which cast member's fate shocked you most before the next story unfolds. Rusty Jacobs as young Maximilian Max Berkovich/David. Rusty Jacobs played young Max like a boy who already knew the world could be stolen if he was clever enough. In Once Upon a Time in America, Max is still young, still hungry, still wearing the rough confidence of the streets. But beneath that teenage swagger, Jacobs planted the first signs of the man who would later become Noodles' greatest friend and most devastating betrayal. Born on July 10, 1967 in New York City, Jacobs was still a teenager when he entered Sergio Leone's vast gangster dream. Before Once Upon a Time in America, he had appeared in Taps, but young Max became the role that fixed his face inside film history. He did not need long speeches. His power came from an attitude, quick eyes, street instinct, and the dangerous charm of a kid who wanted more than poverty had promised him. Public film records list his role in the 1984 film as young Max/David, a detail that becomes heavier once the film's final revelations settle in. After the film, however, Hollywood did not turn him into a lasting child star. His screen path grew quiet with credits, including Taps and a final listed film role in Angesichts der Wälder in 1996. The tragedy was not scandal or collapse. It was the softer heartbreak of a young face remembered by millions. But Jacobs did something rare. He rebuilt his life away from fame. He became a reporter for North Carolina Public Radio, studied law at UNC Chapel Hill, served as an assistant district attorney, and later worked as a criminal defense attorney in Durham, North Carolina. By 2026, at 58, Rusty Jacobs stands as a quiet Hollywood reversal, once the boy who played a future gangster, later a man who stepped into courtrooms to face real crime. His legacy is small but strangely poetic. He left the screen, yet never really left the story of justice behind. Elizabeth McGovern as Deborah Gelly. Elizabeth McGovern played Deborah Gelly like a woman who understood that love could become a cage if she stayed too long. In Once Upon a Time in America, Deborah is not just Noodles' dream girl. She is ambition in a white dress, elegance sharpened by survival, a poor Jewish girl from the Lower East Side who wants the stage more than she wants the boy watching her from the shadows. Her beauty feels distant but never empty. Behind it is discipline, fear, and the quiet cruelty of choosing herself. McGovern was born Elizabeth Lee McGovern on July 18, 1961 in Evanston, Illinois, before her family moved to Los Angeles when her father took a position at UCLA. Her mother was a teacher, her father a professor, and Elizabeth grew up closer to books and theatre than Hollywood fantasy. She studied at the American Conservatory Theatre and Juilliard, and by 20, she had already earned an Oscar nomination for Ragtime. Then Sergio Leone chose her for Deborah, reportedly despite Robert De Niro preferring a New York native for the role. Leone saw something colder and more timeless in her. After the film, she did not chase celebrity in the loudest way. She appeared in She's Having a Baby, The Handmaid's Tale, and The Wings of the Dove. But her real second life came decades later as Cora Crawley in Downton Abbey. Privately, her greatest turning point was leaving Hollywood's centre. In 1992, she married British director Simon Curtis, moved to London, raised 2 daughters, and built a quieter career on stage, screen, and music. It may not look like tragedy, but for a young leading lady stepping away from the machine was its own sacrifice. She also endured major physical hardship, including a double hip replacement, while publicly embracing aging and grey hair without apology. By 2026, McGovern is 64, respected, elegant, and ready for life beyond Downton Abbey after the grand finale. Her future seems selective, musical, and free. Like Deborah, she chose the door that led away and never looked back for permission. Jennifer Connelly as young Deborah Gelly. Jennifer Connelly appeared in Once Upon a Time in America like a memory before it knew it would become tragic. As young Deborah Gelly, she was not on screen for long, but her presence changed the emotional temperature of the film. In that famous ballet moment behind a hidden wall and watched by young Noodles, Deborah became something unreachable: beauty, ambition, innocence, and escape, all moving quietly inside Ennio Morricone's music. Born Jennifer Lynn Connelly on December 12, 1970, in the Catskill Mountains region of New York, she grew up as an only child, far from the idea of Hollywood destiny. Her father worked in clothing manufacturing, her mother dealt in antiques, and Jennifer began as a child model around age 10 after a family connection suggested she audition. She later admitted acting had not truly been her own childhood dream. It was her mother's idea, and she had not grown up as a little theatre kid chasing movie fame. That makes her debut in Sergio Leone's epic feel even stranger, almost accidental, yet unforgettable. After the film, Connelly became one of the rare child performers who escaped being trapped by a single image. Labyrinth made her a fantasy icon. Requiem for a Dream proved she could go emotionally darker than anyone expected. A Beautiful Mind brought her an Academy Award, and later roles in House of Sand and Fog, Snowpiercer, Top Gun Maverick, and Dark Matter confirmed her quiet longevity. But success carried private weight. She has spoken about the unease of working so young, the pressure of being seen for beauty before craft, and the guardedness that became part of her survival. She also endured the loss of both parents while building a family of her own with Paul Bettany. By 2026, at 55, Connelly remains selective, private, and deeply respected. Her future seems measured. Intelligent and free, like Deborah's dance still glowing in a room time never completely erased. Tuesday Weld as Carol. Tuesday Weld entered Once Upon a Time in America not as a soft memory, but as a wound disguised as temptation. As Carol, she was dangerous, damaged, and impossible to ignore, a woman pulled into robbery, violence, desire, and Max's world of power games. She was not the film's center yet. Whenever she appeared, the story became darker, more adult, and more uncomfortable. Born Susan Kerr Weld on August 27, 1943 in Manhattan, she knew pressure long before fame. Her father died when she was still a little girl, leaving the family in financial difficulty. Her mother pushed her into modeling and acting early, turning childhood into work. By 12, Weld was already on screen, carrying a kind of premature world weariness that Hollywood would later sell as glamour. Public profiles have long noted the severe emotional strain of those early years, including breakdown alcohol use and a suicide attempt while still very young. Behind the blonde starlet image was a child who had been asked to grow up far too quickly. Before Carol Weld had already become a cult figure, the reckless beauty of 1960s cinema, then the serious actress of Play It As It Lays, Looking for Mr. Goodbar, and The Winter of Our Discontent. Her performance in Sergio Leone's film earned a BAFTA nomination, proof that even inside a brutal male-dominated epic, Carol left a mark. After the film, Weld's career slowly quieted. 3 marriages ended in divorce. The spotlight that once consumed her became something she seemed determined to escape. Her final screen role came in 2001, and by 2026 at 82, she lives largely outside public view. Her future appears deliberately private. Tuesday Weld survived the machinery that made her famous, and perhaps her greatest victory was learning how to disappear on her own terms. Larry Rapp as Morris Fat Mo Gelly. Larry Rapp played Fat Mo like a man who survived the story but never escaped it. In Once Upon a Time in America, Morris Fat Mo Gelly is not the loudest figure in the room, yet he becomes one of the film's quietest emotional anchors. When Noodles returns after more than 30 years, it is Fat Mo's place he walks into. First, a bar heavy with old smoke, old music, and the silence of everything that can never be repaired. Fat Mo is Deborah's brother Noodles' old friend and the reluctant witness to a world that once felt young and untouchable. He is practical, loyal, a little worn down by life, but never cruel. Around men who chase money, power, revenge, and impossible dreams, Mo feels almost painfully human. He is the kind of character who does not dominate the plot, but gives the audience somewhere to feel safe before the past opens its wounds again. Larry Rapp's own career carries a strange echo of that role. Born on February the 20th, 1948, he entered the film without the long Hollywood mythology surrounding Robert De Niro, James Woods, or Tuesday Weld. Yet for a brief moment he stood beside them inside one of cinema's great gangster epics and made his small corner of the story unforgettable. After the film, his screen career remained short. He appeared in only a handful of projects, including Dear Mr. Wonderful Turk 182, Half Nelson and Betsy's Wedding, before stepping away from the public frame. Just only the softer melancholy of an actor whose most memorable role became both his spotlight and his farewell. By 2026, Rapp is 78, remembered mainly by those who still return to Leone's film like an old neighborhood. And maybe that is why Fat Mo lingers, because some people do not need to conquer history to become part of it. James Hayden as Patrick Patsy Goldberg. James Hayden never lived to see Once Upon a Time in America become a legend. As Patrick Patsy Goldberg, he stood beside Noodles Max and Cockeye as one of the gang's quiet pillars, a loyal man shaped by the streets pulled into crime, not by grand speeches, but by belonging. Patsy was not the loudest member of the group. He was the kind of friend whose silence made the world feel real, the kind whose death left another bruise on Noodles' memory. Born on November the 25th, 1953 in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, Hayden came from a harder life than Hollywood usually admits. After serving as a medic in the US Army during the Vietnam War, he returned to New York, studied at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, and began building an acting career with raw, street-level truth. Before Leone's film reached audiences, Hayden had already found his great stage moment. In 1983, he played Bobby, a heroin addict in David Mamet's American Buffalo on Broadway opposite Al Pacino. The role was painfully close to the edge, and critics saw something frighteningly alive in him. On November 8, 1983, after receiving a standing ovation for that performance, Hayden went home. 6 hours later, he was dead at 29 from a heroin overdose found while still on the telephone with his estranged wife. The tragedy was almost unbearable. In its irony, a young actor praised for portraying addiction was taken by the same darkness before his biggest film was released. By 2026, James Hayden remains frozen in cinema at 30 forever. Patsy forever promising, forever unfinished. Some actors leave careers behind. Hayden left a question. William Forsythe as Philip Cockeye Stein. William Forsythe made Cockeye feel like a loaded gun that had learned how to breathe. In Once Upon a Time in America, Philip Cockeye Stein is one of the gang's most chilling figures, quiet, hard, loyal to the crew, yet always surrounded by the cold suggestion of violence. With his sharp stare and unmistakable presence, he gave the group a darker edge. The sense that friendship in this world was never far from blood. Born on June 7, 1955 in Brooklyn, New York, Forsythe grew up in Bedford-Stuyvesant, a neighborhood that gave him a natural understanding of toughness without turning him into a stereotype. Before fame, he was drawn toward performance, early learning that acting could turn street energy into character. By the time Sergio Leone cast him as Cockeye Forsythe was still young, but he already had the face and rhythm of someone who looked as if he had lived inside crime stories rather than simply acted them. After the film, that image followed him. Hollywood saw the danger in his body language and kept calling. Raising Arizona, Dick Tracy, American Me Gotti, The Rock Blue Streak, The Devil's Rejects, Boardwalk Empire, and Justified turned him into one of cinema's most reliable tough guy character actors. He was never the polished leading man, but he became something just as valuable. The actor audiences believed the moment he entered a room. The quiet burden was typecasting. Forsythe built a career from criminals, killers, bruisers, and men with dangerous histories, even as people who worked with him often described a much warmer man behind the mask. By 2026 at 70, he remains active, selective, and respected, with 3 children and a career stretching back to the late 1970s. His future seems steady rather than flashy, like Cockeye. He may stand in the shadows, but Hollywood learned long ago to notice him there. Brian Bloom as young Patrick Patsy Goldberg. Brian Bloom entered Once Upon a Time in America as one of the boys who made the film's lost childhood feel painfully alive. As young Patsy, he was part of that small street gang before power, betrayal, and death hardened everything around them. He did not need to dominate the screen. His job was quieter, to help the audience believe these boys were once friends before they became ghosts in Noodles' memory. Born Brian Keith Bloom on June 30th, 1970, and raised in Merrick, Long Island, Bloom came from a family that would stay close to entertainment. His brother Scott became an actor and producer, while his brother Mike became a musician. His break came early, almost dangerously early, when Sergio Leone's film introduced him to cinema before most children had even chosen a future. After the film, Bloom did not vanish like many young actors from classic movies. Instead, he was pulled deeper into the machine. He became Dusty Donovan on As the World Turns, winning a Daytime Emmy while still a teenager. That kind of success can be a gift, but also a trap, daily filming, public attention, and the pressure to remain recognizable while growing up in front of strangers. Bloom survived it by changing shape. As an adult, he moved from teen roles into writing action work and voice acting. Captain America Varric Tethras in Dragon Age, BJ Blazkowicz in Wolfenstein, and Nick Reyes in Call of Duty Infinite Warfare gave him a second career many child actors never find. By 2026, Bloom is 55, still active, still private, and still building from behind the microphone. His story is not about collapse. It is about adaptation, the rare child actor who learned how to disappear from one spotlight and survive inside another. Burt Young as Joe Minaldi. Burt Young walked into Once Upon a Time in America with the weight of a man who looked as if he had already survived every back alley in New York. As Joe Minaldi, he did not need much screen time to make an impact. Rough, greedy, blunt, and dangerous, Joe belonged to the violent machinery surrounding Noodles and Max, a gangster whose presence made the diamond robbery plot feel dirtier, heavier, and more real. Born Gerald Tommaso DeLuise on April 30th, 1940 in Queens, New York, Young came from Italian-American roots and a working-class world that later became the soul of his screen image. Before acting, he lived many lives. He left school young, joined the US Marine Corps, became a boxer, worked ordinary jobs, and eventually trained under Lee Strasberg at the Actors Studio. That mixture of discipline, street instinct, and emotional damage became his signature. By the time Sergio Leone cast him, Young was already immortal to movie fans as Paulie Panino in Rocky, the angry, wounded, deeply human brother-in-law who earned him an Oscar nomination. After Once Upon a Time in America, he kept working steadily, appearing in films like The Pope of Greenwich Village, Back to School, Last Exit to Brooklyn, Transamerica, and Win-Win. He was often cast as tough men, but beneath the rough voice and heavy stare, there was always sadness. His greatest private wound came early. His wife Gloria died in 1974, leaving him to raise their daughter Anne. He never remarried. Later in life, he also painted, wrote, and continued acting with quiet persistence. Burt Young died on October 8, 2023 in Los Angeles at 83. By 2026, his legacy remains firm, not a polished star, but a bruised, unforgettable character actor who turned toughness into tenderness. In the end, the cast of Once Upon a Time in America became almost like the film itself. Some vanished into silence, some kept working, some aged into legends, and some, like James Hayden and Burt Young, left the story before the world was ready to let them go. De Niro survived as an icon, Connelly grew from a girl in a dream into an Oscar winner, while others slipped quietly away from the spotlight. Maybe that is the real tragedy of this film. Time does not kill everyone at once. It erases them slowly. Which story hit you the hardest, the ones who died too soon or the ones who lived long enough to carry the memories? And after knowing what happened to them, does Noodles' final smile feel peaceful or terrifying?